Thank you so much for joining us at the 10th Annual Seattle Asian American Film Festival. My name is Adrian Alarilla. My pronouns are he and his. And I am with the programming committee of SAAFF, and I'm moderating the Q&A for this wonderful, touching film, See You Then, that you're tuning in for today. So I would like to first introduce the filmmaker behind See You Then, Mari Walker. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So first off, Mari, would you mind telling us about yourself and maybe talk a little bit about your film?
Sure, absolutely. See You Then is very much a conversation piece between two women, sort of in the vein of the Before series and Brief Encounter, and basically just this thing that I needed to get out into the world to say all the things I wanted to say about transitioning and being a woman and what it meant to me. And I have been wanting to tell stories and make films since I was in high school. And that's when I really fell in love with the medium. And in all those years, I've been like, just so bound and determined to make a movie. I just had to tell stories with all my heart. That I kept on writing these immense, big, grand stories. And every time I talked to my producer friends, they'd be like, okay, you got to tone it down a little bit. You got to make it a little bit shorter, a little bit quieter, a little bit smaller. And so subsequently over the years, I kept on like whittling down to a story that I felt like hopefully I could tell, and something that would give me the opportunity to work with actors, which I really hadn't had an opportunity to do in the documentary world, which is what I had really been existing in the documentary and editing world. And then I just had the miraculous, amazing opportunity to work with two wonderful actresses, with Lin Chen and Puya Maseni. And we just ran right into it right before the pandemic, and we're just so grateful that we had the opportunity to make it.
That's so awesome. It's so spot on when you said that. So when I watched your film, the Before series definitely came first in my mind. I'm a huge fan of the walk and talk kind of genre where barely anything happens, but the conversations are so juicy and so reflective, meditative, and it's not something that's easy to pull off. Definitely. So, are you saying that this is your first like narrative foray into narrative filmmaking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my first feature. Yeah, and it was. I mean, that's one of the greatest challenges, is really getting that script figured out, because, as you said, dialogue conversation films are just exceptionally difficult to put together. And I really attribute a lot of that to my co-writer, Kristen Nuno, who's also our producer for the film. And we were living together at the time, and I started sort of coming up with this idea, and then I sort of approached her about it, and I was like, what do you think about the script that I wrote? And she was like, oh yes. So she gave me some brief notes, and I was like, cool, so you could make those changes, right? Like, that's totally. And I really hadn't even approached her about co-writing with me, but I just sort of naturally assumed that it would happen because we were working on it so closely together. And so I coerced her sort of into this whole experience, but it really turned out to be very beneficial, because I think, especially with conversation films, you really have to have a tete-a-tete, like kind of a contrasting opinion and voice, even in the writing room, to be able to like, and even with Linklater and Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke, like them co-writing on the later installments of the series, I think that speaks a lot to the nature of these sorts of conversation pieces and what the actors also wanted to focus on. So then while we were in pre-production for the film, we had this really beautiful grace period of rehearsal where we didn't really do a lot of rehearsal, but it was a lot of discussion about the characters and their histories and their backgrounds. And then hopefully we allowed for space for Puya and Lin to kind of bring their own signature focus and specificity to it.
Definitely. I mean, it's a beautiful film and full of tough conversation. So, related to that, how was it like working with your actors, with Lynn Chen and Puya Moseni, to bring the script to life?
Oh, the movie wouldn't be anything where it is without them. You know, I had the opportunity to see Puya in a short years ago when I had my own short swim in the festival circuit. And it was a short film called After the Date. And there are a few like actors that you ever meet where they have like an emotional conduit sort of sense, where it was like you could sort of just channel an emotion into a character. And I really saw that in her. And I was just like, oh my gosh, to have an opportunity to work with this amazing actress would be just so wonderful. And so as we were reaching out to figure out who we were going to cast for Naomi, I reached out to Puya about Kris. And I was very nervous because we sort of sent it in blindly without any, you know, it's just basically an offer with the script. And at first she, as she says, she thought it was a joke, that somebody was being kind of strange and like making this sort of weird pitch. And then she read the script, and then we were going to talk over Zoom. And I was very nervous because, you know, at the time, I mean, quite frankly, we hadn't really used Zoom and Skype a lot. So it's always like, it was at the time a very abstract notion, but also because I was nervous and I hadn't really had anybody come in for like a blind read like that and express their feelings. And so I was very nervous, and I started talking about it, and she's like, let me just stop you. And I was like, okay. And then she's like, you know, and she basically just articulated everything about the script from both perspectives with just absolute emotional clarity, where I cried because I just hadn't had that kind of immediate artistic connection with somebody else. And it was just really awesome. And so then, you know, we had kind of our actor champion, you know, then we needed our other actor in Lynn, and we met Lynn through the rehearsal process, and she was the first person coming in. And what was so great about it is, I think like the audition process can be very soul crushing, particularly for actors, because it's just, you know, you go in there and you're meeting these like 4 people that you're going to talk to and spill your emotional truth to for like 5 minutes. 2 of them are on their phones and one of them's operating a camera. You never met these people in your life. So it's a very awkward process. And funny enough, where we had the auditions, Lynn had actually shot a scene for her first feature that she directed, I Will Make You Mine. And so as soon as she like walked in, she just felt immediately at home, and that it wasn't like an actor director collaboration, but it was just more of like a peer-to-peer collaboration. And that warmth I immediately felt, and then immediately put me at ease, where I felt like, okay, like this is just, now I get to focus on this person as an actor, as a performer. And she, you know, obviously blew it out of the park. And then we had chemistry reads where we had Puya fly out and meet up, and then we had a few folks that we had as candidates, and you know, Lynn just brought that emotional depth, and you could just sense that feeling of old friends they had never met before, you know, but you could just sense it immediately that these two had just great chemistry.
Wow. It sounds like your actors almost immediately connected with your film, with your script. And
Wow.
that's wonderful.
I'm just so grateful.
Were there any great. Were there any memorable moments on set when working with them?
Oh, well, there were so many, you know, being the first film, and having not done a few narrative shorts, but really not actually spent a lot of time on set, since most of the history of my work has been through editing. Um, it's all very fresh to me. My producer, one of our producers, Matt Miller, asked me after many months after filming, like, do you remember a lot of it? And I was like, I remember everything. And he's like, oh, I wish I could remember that, because you go from one production to the next. And since it was before the pandemic, it's like before everything changed. And there are just so many wonderful memories. I think one of the biggest is just how unbelievably cold it was. It was an unseasonably cold January in Los Angeles. And of course, I had these poor folks just outside constantly setting up lights and like doing take after take. And so I think we had more hand warmers and heaters on that set than I think I've seen on any other production I've had the opportunity to work on. But really, I think one of the first moments that really got me was during the restaurant scene, when Puya delivers sort of her monologue about before transitioning and what it was like. a lot of that monologue is sort of written from my perspective and a lot of things that I was feeling at the time. Um, and I definitely got very emotional on set, which, you know, I think kind of, I don't know, I think it's important for directors to show their passion for the stories that they're telling on set, if it's crying or laughing or whatever, you know, I think that that can hopefully have the crew and the cast understand how much it means, and that you want to commit just as much as they want to commit, you know. And then of course during the last sequence, you know, with the confrontation, that was very challenging. That was our last few days of filming, and we were filming in downtown LA in this like sort of office building, sort of this art sort of space that we happened to find, and obviously not very popular, certainly within the queer community, but I always describe films as horcruxes, that they're sort of like little pieces of your soul that you chip off and they put into a thing and then you ship it off to the world. And it definitely felt like that during that night, especially just sort of towards the end of that conflict. It just sort of felt like my heart was kind of being wrenched out of my body and my soul. And then after I cut a few times, it just sort of wandered off into a space, and our producer slash assistant director, Mia Schulman, had to come over and ask if I was doing okay. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing okay. But just, you know, and I think that gravity and that heaviness affected all of us. But I mean, really kudos to Puya and Lynn for being able to bring all that emotion to those moments, because, you know, it was a very delicate line that they had to walk, you know, during that confrontation.
Wow, that sounds so powerful and like such a vulnerable moment. Which brings me to my next question, Mari. So what does it mean for you to be able to tell this particular story? I mean, on the surface, it's just like a regular, I don't know, love story, falling out of love story that just happened to have one of its characters as trans. But yeah, what does it mean to be able to tell this story, make this film at this time, and how has that, you know, how were you changed through this film, if it's okay to ask?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that you know, it's so important. I mean, I think the biggest feeling I have coming off of the film and in this process as we're going through the festival run to the eventual release of the film is just how grateful I feel for all the work and all the time and all the effort that was put into it, all the people that sacrificed their sleepless nights to, you know, be on set and tell the story. And I think particularly for me, you know, I think being biracial, being Japanese American, and being trans, I feel like that either aspects of those representation are not fully represented on screen. And to hopefully have contributed to that in any way, I think I'm just so thankful for. I hope we see more of it. I worry after the pandemic, sort of the state of film, where we're at and what those conversations are. I mean, I think it's, you know, I mean, that's why festivals are so important, is to be able to have these conversations as a community, because that's what really holds film together. And without it, I do fear that a lot of voices might get lost during this time. So I think a lot of what I'm hopeful for is that we'll continue to see like an amazing amount of queer content, an amazing amount of, you know, AAPI content getting out there into the world. But I think it's going to require a lot of us to make even stronger pushes than we made before to get these stories told. But in the end, they're worth it. You know, I mean, that's what's so important. And I hope that with this and with other films I make, they can fit pieces into the puzzle of missing parts of our cultural identity and our cultural history that I think is just underseen and shouldn't be, you know.
Definitely, that's so important, and it's such an honor to be able to share your film with our festival. So I'm super excited to be able to share this with our community here in Seattle. So what do you hope audiences will take away from your film when they watch it?
I hope that they'll take away an opportunity to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, to maybe reflect on their own life choices and what led them to where they are. You know, I think that particularly for the queer community, I think a lot of those questions are sort of asked of, you know, what constitutes my history, what makes it important, what aspects do I keep and hold on to, and what aspects do I leave behind. Um, and I think to just have the opportunity to listen to a couple of different voices that we normally don't hear in film, you know, and to just, I don't know, take a ride in a conversation. I feel like so much of our conversation now is so focused on moving forward, you know, and trying to get past all this current situation that we're in, unfortunately. And so I think that it's also important to sort of take that time to reflect on those thoughts and those feelings. I think that as the film has been released, it's been kind of funny because I think at first, as we were making it, I was like, I don't know, like, you know, we didn't have a lot of money for the extras, and I was like, it's a little sparse, and you know, they're walking down the street, and nobody's walking down, and I don't know, like, is that strange? It's just two people talking for the whole thing, and then as we fell into the pandemic, that's basically all we've been doing. But I also think that that's important, and I think that we all have to appreciate that, and I hope that that people can kind of walk away with like a good 72-minute conversation that gives them some opportunities to think.
I definitely agree. And I think what you just said, it like really hits the nail on the head. Like we're always looking for the next blockbuster, you know, action filled film. We're constantly on the move, and your film is a great reminder that it's okay to slow down. It's okay to be still with a film and just reflect and meditate and just take in these wonderful messages of this wonderful film. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. So is there anything you're working on next? And how can audience members connect with you?
Absolutely. I am working on a couple different stories. I have a young adult trans love story set in like the 90s that I'm really excited about, that we're trying to get out into the world. And then I have like a horror film that's queer related, that's so completely different than either of those movies, either See You Then or the other film. And then I have all these like pandemic movies I've been thinking about. It's like a, you know, I'm sure my all my producers and my management people are just like, just slow down, just pick one thing. But you know, it's you fall in love with just telling stories. And probably the best place to find me is on Instagram at Mari W Walker with 2 W's. I have not been on there in an age. You know, it's one of those things where with social media, I feel like we get so like inundated with it, and then once you like stop for like a week, it's like you're like, oh, the sun and like the sky is everywhere, and like, you know what, I have like these hours where I could write, and so I've been trying to get my mind back into it because I do really enjoy being on Instagram. But that's probably the best place. And then See You Then Film is our official Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter handle, in case anyone wanted the film, follow the film.
That's great. That's so awesome. I can't wait to see more from you. And so have you been bitten by the narrative bug? Are you doing any documentaries too?
Actually, I am doing a documentary. I'm working on. It's it's been an age-long project, but I went around and filmed about 425 hours of footage for a Japanese American internment camp documentary that I've been working on for a long time now. And we did about like 77 interviews or so, with like some of them being 4 hours long. And my grandparents were interned and actually met in Tule Lake. So there's a lot of emotional connection to it, family connection to it. And so that's actually been my long-term documentary project that I'm hoping sometime this year to actually finish and force myself to finish it instead of, delaying any further. But I'm very excited about it because I think there's just a lot of great stories and really important, and it's one of those aspects in American history that we culturally, I feel like, continually forget about. And as always, unfortunately, I'm reminded every few years, I swear, that that story still needs to get out there and people to be reminded, But speaking of which, I should also recommend, there's a documentary that was on the festival circuit last year, Manzanar Diverted. I swear I'm forgetting the second half of the name. I'm so sorry. I feel terrible about that.
I think that's it. We're also featuring it here at SAAFF too.
Yes, awesome. I met the filmmakers. They're so wonderful, and the film is so beautiful, and everybody should check it out because it's an important part of American history that we can't forget, especially now.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree. I love that documentary too. On a related note, if you could just share a little bit about, what does it mean to be queer and Asian American, and how does that relate to, the history that that we still live in, that we're trying to move on to, but somehow, we're still in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've always been really grateful to be biracial, period, but also to have that identity before I transitioned, because I think cultural expectations are different when you're a white person in America, but particularly in the circumstance of transitioning, because I think that there's more of an abrupt sort of stop mark there that's more shocking when you've already sort of experienced certain levels of prejudice and these sorts of challenges in life. I think you kind of come to expect it. I think that we're at a time right now which is extremely exciting, particularly in media, for both communities. I think we're seeing a real rise, really, even in the Oscar nominations this year and the last couple of years, and Chloe winning Best Director last year. I mean, there's just a lot of this grand movement towards more representation and understanding, and I think it's a really exciting time to be parts of both communities. I mean, I think even to the point of the film I've been writing, the young adult one, I mean, 99, when the film is currently set, was around the time when I was in high school myself. And just remembering those experiences and even thinking about both aspects of representation at the time, it was very not talked about. So to be in a space where it's well, finally we can actually express ourselves is extremely exciting. By the same token, I think that there's just as much of an easy opportunity for those things to backslide in our community, and especially in the violence that we've seen, particularly towards the AAPI community over the last few years. And also, I mean, the last couple of years being some of the highest homicides for trans women in the country. I think that the forces of evil and opposite forces are still at play, and we still have to fight and be a part of it. But I think that through those times we could also unite and we could create a greater sense of culture. And I think that particularly for the API community, I think that we need that extra reinforcement. We need to with the congealing that I feel like could happen, that could really strengthen all boats rising with the tide, and I think that we need it.
Yes, definitely. There's so much to celebrate, but at the same time, there's so much to keep working on too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. That's so great. It's been such a pleasure talking with you, Mari. Before we end, do you have any final words that you'd like to say?
Yeah, I would just say, everybody watch as many movies as possible. Please, please continue to support independent film and film festivals. This is our lifeblood. This is how we get these films out into the world and for everybody to see. Without this kind of support, honestly, like, our industry might crumble. And I think that we need to continue to have fresh new voices that need to be discovered at festivals through these different channels, through online portals, however we end up getting to it. If even if you can't make it out to the theater, watch stuff virtually. Like, there's so many different opportunities and so many different voices out there that are really, really wonderful and amazing. And I just implore everybody to watch as many things as possible.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mari, again, for hanging out with us. Thank you so much to everyone who watched this beautiful film. Please check out the other great programs playing at SAAFF right now, available virtually from March 3 to 13, 2022 at bit.ly/SAAFF, SAAFF, SAAFF 2022. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you again, Mari. And
Thank you.
enjoy the rest of your day or night.
Thank you. You too. Thank you, everyone.